When I went to see Bill Parenteau in Fredericton, he told me that he believed the province of New Brunswick was a client state. Those are new words for me. I'm not quite sure what they mean, so I asked him.
A client state is one in which the dominant industry, and it's characteristic of places where natural resources are the main driver of the economy, where the dominant industry more or less has more power than the provincial government or the provincial state. So they're able to determine in more significant ways than in other jurisdictions things like forest policy or mining policy or policy towards the petroleum industry, etc. So it's a situation in which there really is a deficit in terms of democratic decision making about natural resources issues.
A deficit in democratic decision making regarding our natural resources. Now, Bill's a real smart guy, and as you can tell, he speaks with tremendous precision. But sometimes it's kind of complicated. So I think what he's saying here is that the people who are supposed to be making the decisions in our best interest are letting someone else or something else influence that decision.
Yeah, I see that New Brunswick as being in that situation really since at least the 1920s, when the transition was made from the long lumber industry, which dominated the provincial economy for about 4 generations, to the modern pulp and paper industry. In the 1920s, by the end of the 1920s, 3 pulp and paper companies controlled 70% of the industrial forest in the province, and control of the crown lands in particular, but the industrial forests, and I mean private and crown lands, gives companies enormous power over forest policy. And I think that the significance of that is that there's always been, since the 1920s, a kind of disconnect between forest policy, the ideology behind forest policy, which is essentially a corporate ideology, and a pre-existing ideology, especially in rural northern New Brunswick, that the crown lands are the people's land, and that they should first and foremost be used as an engine for social and economic development. And we still see, the foundation of the debates that go on today are part of this at a higher intellectual level. They're part of that disconnect in 2 competing ideologies about the use of the crown lands.
A disconnect in competing ideologies regarding the crown lands. One ideology is a corporate ideology, and the other ideology is the people's ideology. Believing that those forests, those lands should be there to the benefit of the people. The corporate ideology is about profit. So our governments have been using our crown lands to say, here, we have all this resource, so you can make profit. But now, by making profit means that you have to create employment. You have to create jobs. And that's basically what's been happening for the last 90 years. The way that we've been managing, and I'm saying we, the government, have been managing our crown forests is to assure that, corporations are viable, are profitable. That way they'll stay here and keep creating jobs. That's been the attitude. And corporations bring pressure upon governments and the Department of Natural Resources to make sure that it stays that way. Even though that things have changed in the last 90 years. The fact that we've had to give millions of dollars of subsidies to the industry, the fact that the industry is falling apart in a way. How many mills have been closed down in New Brunswick in the last 10 years? There's only a couple of players left, while there used to be 15, 20. And we're still providing them with millions of dollars in subsidies and interest-free loans, etc. And that's besides barely charging them anything for the wood that they're cutting off our lands that they can run in their mills. So we're sort of keeping the corporations viable and alive because that's the ideology. Maybe it's time to rethink how we look at creating jobs using our crown forests. Because I'm not so sure that we're really getting much benefit by keeping the corporations alive.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's the dominant company now, of course, is the Irving J.D. Irving Company. The mill in Nacoit closed and opened. The mill in Dalhousie's gone. The mill in the Miramichi's gone. The mill in Bathurst, I think, is gone. So there's really one major entrepreneur, one major firm left, and that's the Irvings. So that gives them, a significant amount of power over forest policy.
Do you think it's still that New Brunswick is still a client state? Why?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say that I'm sure that the people at the Irving Company would disagree with me, but they do have an enormous amount of power over our forest policy. The most recent example would be the business of buying private wood and not cutting on Crown land, and that the Irvings were found to be continuing to cut on Crown land. So the response of the provincial government was to change the policy back. The interesting thing about there's recent debates about wood supply in the Conservative government was debating wood supply for quite a long time, but within the context of the period that they were coming to make a decision, the Irving Company shut down their mill in Juniper. So the ability to do things like that now they may actually they may have a justification and a plausible argument that had nothing to do with them putting pressure on and the reason they used was that they didn't have enough wood. Now they may be able to make a plausible argument to some people that the closing of the Juniper mill had nothing to do with the deliberations over wood supply, but for many of us who have studied the forest industry, there are too many of those kinds of coincidences to, for them to be really kind of plausible in the long run.
So what you're saying basically is that possibly the Irving Company is weaving a big stick or holding a big stick, and at the end of it, it's about jobs.
Yeah, there's no
more wood, or we'll shut down the mill.
Right. Yeah. There's no doubt about that. They have I think extraordinary power in the province. But I think one thing that should be said is it's not a conspiracy. They're a corporation, and this is the way corporations behave. They happen to be in a favorable position within New Brunswick to influence forest policy. So they're doing really what any other corporation would do. From their perspective, it's good corporate practice. From the perspective of the people in New Brunswick who are worried about their rural communities declining, it's another matter. So I think that should be made clear that there's nothing inherently evil or diabolical about the Irving Company. It's typical kind of corporate behavior. They just happen to be in a very favorable position in this province where they really control a disproportionate amount of the forest resource base. And the control of the Crown lands has always meant enormous political power, so they're no different in that way.